I am ready. All right. So Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach. So it is different tonight. It is different in a number of ways. As you've heard me say many times, the service itself begins with Baruch Hu, and everything prior to that is a warm-up. The assumption being that you're coming from that which is normal, the weekdays, into prayer, and therefore you don't just shift, you go to a process of readings that enable you to get that feeling. That is true except on Yontif, where the day before is either Chol HaMoed or Yontif. Therefore, the assumption is you're already in that mode. And therefore, the need for the preliminary parts of the Kabbalat Shabbat isn't there. And so the rabbis taught you go right, you jump in right after L'Chadodi, and so the service begins on page 23. You'll also notice the melodies are different as we go through because it's Yontif as well as Shabbat. So, and we don't have a minyan, and so you'll notice we skip sections. It's going to be a fascinating service. All right, page 23. We'll do a little extra singing here. Mizmor shir, shir leyom ha-Shabbat. Mizmor shir, shir leyom ha-Shabbat. Tov lehodo l'Adonai, lezamer shimcha elyon, lagid baboker chasdecha, ve'emunatcha b'halelot. Mizmor shir, shir leyom ha-Shabbat. Mizmor shir, shir leyom ha-Shabbat. Ale yasur v'ale nabel. Tzadikat amar yifrach ki erez balvanon yizgeh shitolim bevet Adonai bechatrot Elohinu yafrichu od yenovon b'seva tishenim ve'ra'ananim ye'yo lehagir ki yashar Adonai tzuri ve'lo avlata bo. Page 24. Do we have people on Zoom or not? Okay, we do not have a minyan. Idotecha nemenu mod levidecha nava kodesh Adonai liorech yamim. So without a minyan, we cannot say Kaddish. We also cannot say Baruch Hu. So we continue on page 28, in the middle of the page, the first bracha before the Shema, the bracha of creation. Baruch atah Adonai melech. El chai v'kayam tamid yimolch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai hamari v'aravim. Page 29. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amcha Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadita. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu v'shokvenu v'kumenu נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה. באהבתך תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Page 30. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והים שמות תשמעות את אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום ואהבתם לקרוא ולכם, ונתתם את הארצכם בעיתו יומם וצלחתם. משהו משפט שומעים על הארץ ויאמר סידורתם אותו הזכרתם מקום מצוותיכם ועשיתם מקום ולא תתדרו אחרי מה שאתם זונים אבל מה תזכרו ועשיתם מקום מצוותיכם. Adonai Elohechem Emer. Page 32. חירות העולם, המר יבנה בגין ים סוף, יד רופאים ויקרנם בדימות ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילה ספלה. מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה, זה לי ענו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גא ישראל. Page 33. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים. ופרוס ונצחת שמך ותקטן נביא את זה טובו מפנך ואשר למד שמך, ויגן בעתנו ועצם אלוהים אויב Ufros aleinu sukat shalom mecha baruch ata Adonai hapori sukat shalom aleinu v'yakol amo Yisrael v'yal Yerushalayim. Turn to page 34 and we rise. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasor et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasor et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. בני ובן בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וידבר משה את מועדי אדוני אל בני ישראל, יתגדע ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחייך בית ישראל. בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו, יהי שמירה במברך לעולם עולם ימיה. יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה, שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מנחה ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא v'yimeru. Amen. Before we begin the silent Amidah, which is the Yontif Amidah, page 41, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to go off script a little bit afterwards. I have a sermon, but it seems a little ridiculous to deliver a formal sermon in an intimate setting. And so what I'm going to do is just open the floor for Ask the Cantor. Bring the questions, all right, so you have a chance to think a little bit while we're doing the Amidah as well. Page 41b.
amount of spice, like the original spicy tempura, made with a blend of aged.
So in my first congregation in Rockland County, New York, where I spent 7 years, the rabbi I worked with was Rabbi Simon Potok, brother of Chaim. And he had a monthly Ask the Rabbi. And while I certainly don't have his yeshiva background, I'm open to asking questions. And if there are some questions on Passover or anything else in general about Jewish living, I'm going to open the floor. There are some people online, and so I'll probably repeat the question so that they hear as well. All right, so don't be shy. Yes, sir. So the question is, if a person does not know the Hebrew, can they say it in English? So the answer is yes. Again, on a personal level, if you're praying on your own, you should pray in a way in which you fully understand what it is you're saying. When you come together as a community, when we do it together, then you try and add the Hebrew where you can. So in other words, there's the personal prayer, and there's that which is done in the collective. If the Hebrew is completely foreign to you, read the English, and then try and join together in the Hebrew where we come together as a community. My challenge to you is let's learn the Hebrew. Let's raise the bar. Rather than bringing it down, let's raise the bar. That would be my challenge. What else? It's your moment. All right, I'll share with you a couple things I noted in the biblical story of the Exodus then. One is very humorous. There's a line in the Torah that says, "Vata'al hatzfardea vatachas et haaretz," which basically is translated as, "And the frogs arose and they covered the earth." The problem is, if you look at the Hebrew, it's not hatzfardim, it's hatzfardea. And a frog arose and it covered the entire land. Must have been one giant frog. That was a conversation we had over my Seder table that made for a little bit of humor. But somehow, the grammar in the Bible doesn't always match modern Hebrew's grammar. But it does. It says it in the singular. There's this giant frog. The other thing I mentioned this morning, who was here this morning? Okay, we got a brand new crowd. Good. So there is a line, again, it says, "And the Israelites went up from Egypt armed." Okay, and the word that is used there is weird. It's really not, we don't know how to translate it. It says vachamushim, and that's how they translate armed. Okay, but Rashi points out that that's just ridiculous because the word chamesh, we all know the word chamesh, chamisha chumshei Torah, chamesh megilot is 5. And how he translates the text instead is that only 1/5 of the Israelites actually left Egypt. 80% chose to stay. So the question that comes from that, it's Rashi, it's not Levine, okay? So it carries a little more weight. But given that, what comes to mind is the same kind of thing in the Holocaust. What made people decide to stay or leave? Or today in the Ukraine? There are people who are staying. There are people who are trying to flee. What are the factors that might lead one, and if it happened in the Exodus, why would they stay and why would others leave? Now, I don't necessarily have an answer, but I think it's a fascinating look into human thought and psychology as to what are the things that would cause people to stay. Just, one of the readings I did recently suggested that it's not the main reason. One of the things is all your family is buried there. It's really hard to walk away from that. You have to be really miserable. You're never going to be back. You may never see the people in the community again. There's all sorts of reasons why people would be hesitant to leave. You're usually leaving your possessions, all that you've worked for. You're leaving everything you know about life. You're moving to a culture that is completely different. We know that the Jews who came here in the 1900s and the 1800s found a culture. They expected a golden Medina, and were they ever surprised? The Lower East Side was anything but. Why do people leave? Why do people stay? Vachamushim, it's a Rashi interpretation, but it certainly doesn't make sense as armed. It means 5. Any other comments, questions? Have I provoked anybody? All right. We'll continue with our service. Next time, come prepared with questions. Page 47, we rise for Vayechulu. Vayechulu hashamayim ve'haaretz v'chol tzevam vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi'i milakto asher asa vayitbot bayom hashvi'i mikol milakto asher asa Vayevarech Elohim et Yom HaShvi'i Vayekadesh oto Kivo Shabbat Mikol Melakto Asher bara Elohim lasor Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Agadol Hagibor Ve'Anora El Elyon Ekonei Shamayim Va'aretz Magin Avot Bidvaro Mechaye Metim Bimamaro Ha'el HaKadosh She'en Kamo Hameniach Le'amo V'yom Shabbat Kodsho Kivam Ratza Le'aniach Lahem Kivam Ratza Le'aniach Lahem Lipanav Navod V'yarav Afachad V'nodeh Lishmo B'chol Yom Tamid Me'en Abrachot El Haodaot Adon Shalom Mekadesh HaShabbat Umvarech Shvi Umeniach B'Kedusha Le'amedu Shnei Yoneg Zecher Lemase V'Reshit Eloheinu ve'Eloi Avoteinu Retzei retzei v'imnuchatenu Kachenu b'mitzvotecha V'ten chelkenu b'toratecha Sabenu mitovecha V'samchenu b'shuatecha V'taher libeinu Li'ovdecha be'emet V'hankilenu Adonai Eloheinu B'yava uvratzon Shabbat Kodshecha V'yanuchu v'Yisrael Mikadesh Shemecha Baruch Ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. This is really an example of every human life matters. We have 10. We would not be able to have a menu without every single person here. Congratulations. We continue, page 48. Yitkara v'yikara shemei rabah. Yisrael bagalav izman karev yimeru amen yesh miraba mivarach le'alam olam yomaya Yitparak v'yishtabak v'yitpar v'yitroma v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yidalach shmir kudesha bricho la'ela minko birchata v'shirata tuvbrata v'nechamata damiran v'yalma v'yimeru amen tikabat zilor honu v'avhon d'chol Yisroel kodam avhon d'vishmea v'yimeru יש למה רבמים שמיים וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל וימרו Ose shalom bimromav, hoyase shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'imero. Page 50. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'am, v'romemanu mikol ha'ashor, v'kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav, v'atiten lanu Adonai lanu b'yava, Shabbatot limenucha u'moadim l'simcha, Chagim uzmanim l'sason, et Yom HaShabbat hazeh, v'et Yom Chag hamatzot hazeh. Zeman cherutenu b'yava mikra kodesh, zecher l'tziad Mitzrayim, kivanu v'acharta, v'yotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat u'moadei kodshecha, b'yava uvratzon, b'simcha v'sason, hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, mikadesh hashabbat v'Yisrael v'hazmanim. L'chaim. Aleinu 51. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol, l'atei gedula liyotzeh breshit, shelo asanu kigoyei ha'aratzot, lo samanu k'mizbecha ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu chol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'nishachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei halachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shehu noteh shamayim v'yosed haaretz, u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim ima'al, u'shchinatu zo begovei meromim. Hu Eloheinu einod, emet malkeinu efezulato, kakatu b'torato, v'yadata yom v'hashevota elevavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim, b'shamayim yemal, v'yalaret, mitachat enod. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. May be seated. Our hearts go out to the families of Elena Bleiberg, Alan Fisherman, Ben Geffen, and Lorraine Brown. We're observing the yortzites of David Bernath, Jerry Bernstein, Sam Cohen, Alvin Diamond, Harry Furash, Sheldon Gelbart, Francis Greenberg, Hannah Greenberg, Michael Heffler, Bernard Kagan, Ellie Kaplan, Harry Karn, Juliet Caden, Alfred Kramer, Sandy Levitt, Arnold Podell, Rebecca Rabinowitz, Irving Schneider, Ellie Schneider, Royce Ann Sline, Samuel Solomon Spielman, Herbert Stern, Hilda Sternberg, Victor Wilkes, Meyer Jack Wolfert, and Israel Wolfthal. All those observing yortzeit, or those in a period of mourning, we ask you to rise. Page 52, Words of Mourners Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah. B'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayeh dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'nomar. Yehi shmei Rabbah mivarach le'olam elamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yalma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. You may be seated. Services tomorrow morning at 9:30, during which we will recite Yisker. A couple other announcements. As you know, every weekday morning, Sunday to Friday, we have a morning minyan at 9 o'clock on Zoom. This Sunday morning, I'll be doing the second in the series of discussions about the afterlife, this time looking at rabbinic views. A lot of it based on a book that's just come out at the seminary by one of the professors there. So it's a lot of new insights and a lot of things, actually, I will tell you, that I learned in process. So it should be an interesting discussion. It should be some eye-opening things as well, because I know it was for me. Rabbi Teller's Exploring Judaism class continues this Wednesday. Next Friday night Ruach, it's back, Friday the 29th, 6:15. Come down and sing. And I think that's it. Are there any other announcements? I think the men's club breakfast has been canceled for this Sunday, correct? And I think that's it. Yes? All right, no dancing bears this week, right? No dancing bears. Okay, with that, we're going to conclude. We're going to conclude with Hatikva, page 395. We ask you to please rise. O Lord, believe apnima nefesh Yehudi homia ufate mizrach kadima ayin letzion sophia. O Lord, no dabayim leotam kovshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion Yerushalayim leotam kovshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Please find someone to bless. Yivarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichonecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. Shabbat shalom.